breaking down, what does this word mean from a behavior perspective? So it's really hard. Like, I think the reason that so many people are confused and they have a hard time remembering things and understanding complex topics is because they have lots of words in their heads that they have not defined. I really mean, like, I truly believe that, which is why every book that I have begins with a definition of terms. Just like, this is what an offer is. This is what a lead is, right? These are what this means, right? And until you have that, you're basically making face noise, right? Like, if I say leads and you perceive that as something different, then we can't actually have a conversation because we're not talking about the same thing. For me, defining patience was helpful, which is figuring out what to do in the meantime. Like, that's patience. Like, we're like, I'm not patient. It's like, no, you just need to figure out what to do in the meantime. That's all. Like, you and I are being patient on all the investments that we made last year while we're having this podcast. Like, they are happening. We're figuring out what to do in the meantime. So we're being patient. And so it's like, patience feels bad when you're focusing on it, but if you're not focusing on it, then patience happens by default. Like sadness, for example, like that was really helped me figure out, just even defining the word in terms of operational perspective, helped me get out of those funks faster, which is sadness comes from a lack of options, a perceived lack of options, which is why it feels like hopelessness. But if it comes from a perceived lack of options, then it means that you solve that with knowledge, because it's perceived lack of options, which is an ignorance problem, which means it's solvable, which all of a sudden gives me something to do. So then all of a sudden I do have an option, and then you can get out of the funk. And like, anxiety is the reverse of that, which is I have many options and I don't know which one to pick, which means I don't have priorities. So like, you solve sadness through knowledge, you solve anxiety through decisions. And so like, helping me just spell those out to myself, I'm like, I feel anxious. Okay, that means that I have lots of paths and I need to make a decision. So which one am I going to decide so I can get out of this bad feeling? If I have sadness, great, what do I not know? Okay, now I have to go figure that out. Great, I have something to do. And so that like, I think these are like mental models around using emotions to fuel the behaviors that you want. To operationalize something, it is simply going back down to, when I say I'm confident, what does that mean? It's not a feeling. It's not what other people say about you. Like, none of that is measurable. Like, how much, like, what is measurable? It's a percentage of likelihood that what I say will happen, period. That's what it is. Now, what you'll also find is that there are a lot of words that mean the same thing. And that doesn't mean that the concept wrong. It's just the fact that English or whatever language you learn usually has a melting pot of like, well, this is the version of the Nordic word, and this is the version of the Hindi word, and this is the version of the French word. And they're all in the lexicon, but most of them more or less mean the same thing. And so getting away from words meaning what the dictionary tells us it means, and just say, what does it mean to me in terms of what I can do with it? Then I think makes navigating life a lot simpler, because the only thing we can control is our behavior. And so if we define the words in terms of what we do about it, then these all become things that we can control and can change our lives with. I'm a big believer in a lot of the Stoic virtues. And a lot of that just comes down to having your opinion of yourself be all that is required. And so it's like living for the future version of yourself and letting that person be your ultimate judge. You can't both say that you cannot admit deficits and say you're awesome at the same time, in my opinion. Like, I can't say like, I suck at all these things and then also be like, I'm the best. Like, you can't do it. You either like, you suck at all these things. And I think it's the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is like, the more you learn about something, the more you realize you don't know. Everything is removing the limitation, right? It's like, I want to get to here. And so getting there is usually straightforward. It's the obstacles that are all the things that people put in their own way. Like, it's not about being intelligent, but about being like hardworking, right? It's like, if you build your identity around that trait, then you can always do more of it. Like, you can always work harder. You can always put extra reps in, et cetera. And I think if people build that trait as their identity and where they get their self-esteem from, then it becomes a self-reinforcing cycle, but they're the ones who are in control of it rather than the outcome. I think it's vision of what you actually want to do is like, where do you want to go? Because you can have somebody who works really hard at building a restaurant, like one single store, and you work really hard at building an app that's going to change the world. The amount of hours and effort that go into building an amazing restaurant and that are probably about the same, but the amount of impact is disproportionate on something that can go to gazillions of people. So I think you have to have some level of vision, and that comes from the people that you're around. I think like confidence without evidence is delusion. And so the idea that you aren't confident if you don't feel confident right now is okay, because the question is, what are you trying to be confident about? Like confidence as a word, right? If we can define terms, is the percentage likelihood that you have that what you think will happen or will happen, right? Like in statistics, like what is our confidence score on this metric, right? And so the same thing applies to a person. What is our confidence that when Johnny says he will do this, it will happen? And so we have our own confidence metric for ourselves, which is a percentage likelihood that we will do what we say we're going to do. And so the way that you can increase that confidence is to have more evidence that you've done things when you said you would do them in the past. And so I think it's about looking retrospectively and thinking, you know, what story can I tell around this data that would give me more evidence that I actually do have some of these traits that I didn't think about? The big meta skills come from those, what we call virtues, but virtues are just behaviors, which can be trained. I always came from the perspective of like, I want to do the formula and then live my life how I want to live. And if that means that sometimes I drink more and sometimes I drink less, or sometimes I work out more and sometimes I work out less, sometimes I eat dessert, sometimes I eat really small desserts, that's fine. And so it's just like, what are the actual things that matter? And if you look at, and I know you have a lot of wealthy friends, like people, the way people work, the routines that they have are so varied, which to me means that they don't matter. Because if there were something that absolutely has to be done, then it has to go down to first principles of, okay, in order for people to find out about your stuff, you have to let them know. Great. So you have to advertise it in some way for people to find out about it, to buy, period. I try to have as few rules as possible to give myself as much latitude to live my life. Some people might look at me and say that, oh, Alex is really disciplined, but I actually really do what I want to do every day. And it just so happens to be work that is productive and makes money. But that statement that you made earlier that people, what you said? You said people do
what makes them feel the way they want to feel.
Right. And then you said, well, oh, it's because it's not making them feel the way they want to feel. And my only addition to that would have just been yet. Just yet. If you can give the thing the opportunity to reinforce its own behavior, then it goes from external to internal. Where like video editors, for example, like there's people who love, I mean, we're going to film school, right? In the beginning, you suck at editing film, but then you like make the letters appear and you get instant feedback and you're like, whoa, that was rewarding, right? And then you do it again, and then you learn another technique and another technique, another technique. And so then the behavior itself becomes rewarding and you begin to like work, right? You begin liking your work. And so I think it really is that just getting over the hump in the beginning of knocking on 1,000 doors rather than 5, and realizing that it would make sense that you would suck because you haven't done it before. But knowing that if other people have done it too, that there is a reward that will eventually come and it will reinforce me just like it has every other human before me who has done this. And I think just like one of my core, assumptions, as I like to say, is that if somebody else can do these behaviors, I can do these behaviors and get the same outcome. Barring external environments or timing and things like that. But, assuming that those are the same, like door knocking to sell solar today is the same as it was last year. And if I see somebody who's number 1 in solar and I do the same behaviors as them, I will likely get an outcome that is decent.